All right, welcome back to Influencer Chat, recapping the circle. It's been a long time since we've been here to talk about the circle, but we're back to talk about U.S. Circle Season 2. I'm joined here, as always, by Brian, here to talk about some fun circle madness. How you doing, Brian?
Hey, I'm doing really well, especially given that these four episodes kind of slapped. Let's be honest. Like the first season of Circle, I really enjoyed, very fun. I hadn't seen any other versions, so for me it was like very new, very exciting. This one, obviously same format, but way more intense right off the jump. So I'm very excited to talk about that.
Yeah, that's something I thought about recently is like the last few years of like competition reality TV have been kind of like lackluster, and then we have COVID coming in, and like all these shows have to be pushed off. We haven't had Survivor in over a year, and and uh, and we come back into 2021. We have BB Can 9. We have both UK seasons of The Circle, which were incredible. And now we have coming into the US version of The Circle, Season 2. And so far, these first four episodes of The Circle have been better in my entirety of the first season of the US version.
Yeah, it's I
So
mean
I'm
it's really
happy. I'm
crazy.
very excited
Like
for the season.
it's really like shocking to me that the situation, we'll get into it, but like one little like thing just completely snowballed into a giant, potentially season defining like split within the players. So like crazy. It's wild. I love it so far.
Yeah, I mean, we all go through like the like instigating factors piece by piece, and maybe maybe we can pinpoint exactly where it completely goes off the rails, unrecoverably for Savannah and Terilisha, obviously. But yeah, no, it's definitely a wild storyline that we get, especially in episodes 3 and 4 here. But I do think that the setup that they did in episodes 1 and 2, where we have kind of like this rising action, like building everyone up and like putting the pieces in place, only for everything to get knocked over in episodes 3 and 4, was just
Yeah.
really well executed from like a narrative perspective.
And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Like I do want to give Bryant
Oh yeah.
his due. You know,
Oh, for
it
sure.
sucks
Yeah,
to
no,
be the
no,
first
we'll
one
go
off.
through it
So
all.
yeah, so yeah, what you lead, I'll follow. Let's go.
Yeah, so we come in episode 1. We're introduced to our initial 8 players. They end up being 5 real players and 3 catfish. I believe the first player we're introduced to is the ill-fated Savannah. So what were your initial thoughts on Savannah just right from the start in episode 1?
I definitely thought like she was going to be. I don't know why. Maybe it was just the way the edit was. I thought, all right, this person, she's playing as herself. She's attractive. She seems smart. Probably good things for this type of a game where all you have is, a profile and a picture to go off of. And I thought she was going to be like a long term important member of the cast. I don't know if you felt the same
Mm-hmm.
way. So I had high hopes for her off the jump, which honestly, she's only in 4 episodes, but she did deliver like a lot. So I guess those weren't completely unfounded hopes.
Yeah, no, I really liked Savannah in episode 1. I think that she was definitely one of the like standout characters in that first episode, especially, and she ended up becoming an influencer, which we'll get to. So I think that I definitely, after episode 1, I was like, oh yeah, Savannah, like lock her into the finale, or at least going
Right.
very deep. Like she gave me kind of like Sammy vibes from last season of the US version. I think there was a comparison I made kind of, subconsciously in my mind there. And Sammy ends up in the finale, ends up in third place. So that's kind of the trajectory I was expecting for Savannah from the first episode. And yeah, I really enjoyed what she was bringing to the game at the start. But we'll get into the specifics after we introduce the full cast. And I think after Savannah is the next person we get introduced to Trevor. I believe we get Delisa acting as Trevor. So we have Delisa here, who's 23 backwards.
23 backwards. Yeah, that was a fun line. I like her a lot. I think she is playing an interesting game, being, playing as her husband, but as a single version of her husband. And I think so far she's done a really good job of like trying to project out what like the stereotypical gender roles of like guys and girls. She's very careful to not gossip too much because she sees that as something that could potentially expose her as a catfish. I don't want to get into like gender stereotypes or whatnot, but like everybody's so hyper paranoid, and we see that in this episode for sure. That like I think she definitely is playing a dangerous but interesting game, playing as her husband. What did you think of that choice?
Yeah, I think the choice is fine. It always interests me the different reasons that people give as to why they choose the catfishes they choose. And for Delisa, it seems like she just kind of thinks that like she'll have like an easier time. Like she thinks it would be easier for people to find like a single dad popular than like a married mom. Maybe, I guess, is the reasoning, and just using that. I think that Trevor is he has a rough start, which we'll talk about like saying like what's the 411, and like I'm a fun guy, saying that like 5 different times within the course of like a 20-minute chat, which but I think that's kind of a thing that a lot of the catfishes do in the early times, is they really lean heavily into the character because they're like overcompensating to a point. And we see kind of Emily does this a little bit as well, and River a little bit as well, where like I think that a lot of players like have this kind of vision of how they want to be a catfish, and they come in like ready to go and ready to be this character, and they just like start throwing all this stuff at the wall in terms of like making sure that the character they're playing is getting across, rather than just like acting like a normal person and like kind of letting the personality of the character sell itself.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's like a lot of
a lot of, like you said, I'm a nice guy, a lot of like, hey girls, girl gang, almost overcompensating. I wonder, that's something, I guess, if you're watching this and you go on the circle someday, maybe, suss out the people who are overly like, just talking about their gender, their, I guess, I don't know how to put it best, but like, even if someone's like, oh, I'm a lawyer, and they start making tons of like lawyer references, that could be an indication of someone overcompensating for a catfish story.
Or if they're like a washed up pop star and they make a bunch of references to that over and over again. Yes, something like that.
That too. But no one would ever do that.
No, that would be ridiculous. I'll get into kind of more specifics about how I think that you can play a catfish effectively when we talk about Emily. I think that Emily's doing a lot of things right and a lot of things wrong there. I think there's a lot to learn from the way that she's acted so far. But yeah, we'll get to Emily. But first, we had to take a little pit stop into our boy Bryant, I believe. Yeah. Or was Emily introduced next? Or was it Bryant or Emily first?
I had Bryant. I actually had Bryant before Delisa, but maybe at some point here. He is interesting, Ben.
Yes.
I have this like in my mind, like Bryant was like a very motivated like business bro who had like a mental breakdown from a high stress job and now is like a super hippie. Is that unfair?
That seems to be kind of right on the money there, based off of the pictures that we saw from his like before his kind of spiritual transformation. But he also talks about in conversations later with Terilisha in episode Terilisha, I mean in episode 2, that he had like a stimulants addiction, and
Mm-hmm.
he was bulimic, and so that all could potentially play into like this kind of very high stress, financial or corporate job or something
Right. Yeah.
that he's kind of like burnt out on. I was like, okay, I'm going to become like this breathologist, self-help guru guy instead.
And hey, if that makes him happier than working a fucking like cutthroat corporate
Mm-hmm.
job, then like all power to him. It's just, and it
Mm-hmm.
played out on the show. It is a hard wavelength to be on for like a social game. Like it's very unrelatable to like the average
Yes.
person.
Yeah. I think we'll talk about Bryant ends up being our first dude for the season, and kind of like the things that he did wrong. I think that even just like in the conversations that we'll see Bryant have with people, uh, I I can't imagine having a conversation with somebody for the first time and them interacting in a casual conversation the way Bryant does,
Mm-hmm.
and like really like not kind of feeling a little bit overstimulated, or like a little bit you know on like I don't even know how I would feel if I jumped into a conversation with the person I just met and they came off like Bryant does, where he's like talking about like I want to be loyal to you for many lifetimes, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, man, I'm not 100% sure I even remember your name at this point.
And I think like off of that, like it's even harder when it's just in text, because it's like maybe in person you can
Mm-hmm.
feel out like, oh, this guy is sincere even though he says weird things.
Yeah.
But like through text, I feel like it's so hard to accept that as sincere. And then it did not help him that he got like the I raised $10,000 for a friend, because he did in real life. Like it doesn't, there's no like question from the show like, is this real? But if someone's playing a catfish, it's like in this type of a game, it's like that's too good to be true. No one casually
Mm-hmm.
raises $10,000 for their friend to be, not homeless anymore. And so it kind of put everyone, I think, at least arm's length, if not many arm's lengths away from Brian.
Yeah, we'll get to that in episode 2 after he's blocked and he visits River, aka Lee, where
Mm-hmm.
River says to him, like, everybody I think kind of got the sense that you were one of two things. You were either too good to be true, or you were too good and you had to be eliminated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of, that's not a good place to be.
No, I definitely think if I was in the circle, I would have been like, nah, this guy's not real. You know,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
that's just me being a cynical bastard, but
Mhm.
I, like you said, too good to be true.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, it's a game, it's a popularity contest, the game of the circle is. And on top of that, it's also a game about eliminating the more popular people
Mm-hmm.
if possible. And so when you have somebody who has a lot of the tools to be popular or to be liked or to be somebody that you would want to see win the game,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody who is not doing a good job of forming personal relationships just because their like surface level veneer they give off is not something that would be relatable to a broad amount of people. Like that's just like that. Those are two very bad qualities to have in a game like the Circle.
Yeah, no
But
doubt.
good qualities to have in life.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure like in real life he's an awesome person, but
Yeah.
didn't work out for this.
Yeah. All right, so that's Bryant. We'll get into more of the specifics with him, but first let's talk about first impressions of Jack, aka Emily, here in the Circle, our second catfish.
Yeah, so obviously I think you and I are both gonna have biases just because Jack
Mm-hmm.
kind of runs tangentially within the same circles as us. Like people we
Yeah.
know him. People like
Yes. Yeah.
we've played in either online games or live reality games have played with Jack. So in that sense, we're very
Hmm.
predisposed to like Jack. But I really like Jack.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. We have a lot of mutuals with Jack,
Mm,
and we definitely have we share a lot of the same like you know uh, hobbies and
mm,
social circles with Jack. So while we don't know him personally, we do have that kind of vague feeling of camaraderie. And yeah,
mm,
definitely right off of the bat, we have Jack putting off like these funny one-liners and stuff like
mm.
that. He's definitely going to be kind of uh, like the villain you love to hate sort of role.
Yeah.
Where Bryant, one of the first things he says is Bryant's like, "Oh, I teach breath work for a living," and Jack's like, "Yeah, well, you might as well just say you're unemployed."
Rough but fun. I mean,
Yeah,
we like the cheeky one-liners. So
yeah, of course. Um, and yeah, what are your thoughts on Jack though, and this character he's playing of Emily, who I believe is a friend of his, probably from college?
yeah, I mean, I think I think it's hard to. For me personally, I would probably play the circle as myself, um, just because I feel like I could do something to ruin my own game by not, you know, coming off. We see an example of this when he, as Emily, is speaking to Trevor, who's
Yep.
also a catfish, and he's trying to be like, "Oh, I'm like a fun sports loving girl," but
Hmm.
then on the other side, Trevor is like, I don't know about sports. So
Yeah.
like it's like missing each other, and
Right.
when they're trying to build, a potential relationship. So like I feel like this would be hard to pull off. I don't know.
Hmm.
What do you think about that?
Sure. I mean, in that specific conversation, which we can get to, I guess we'll talk about that now because it should be pretty short to talk about. But um, I think that if Trevor was real, this wouldn't have
Happens, yeah.
landed as poorly as it ended up landing. Because
Mm,
like I don't know about you, but I feel like even like a 21-year-old girl from New York who comes from like a Giants sports or like a family that supports the Giants, I feel like even like a 21-year-old girl would know who Saquon Barkley is. I feel.
yeah, I mean, well,
Come on, I don't know. I mean,
well,
I
this
don't
is
know.
also from New York, and she didn't know. Uh,
Sure, I guess, but like I don't know. But like I feel like maybe it's my New England bias, or maybe
mm,
it's my bias because I follow football.
mm,
But like I feel like you could ask most like 21-year-old women in New England who come from families that support the Patriots to like name Patriots players, and they could probably name two or three like
yeah.
big names, at least in recent history. Like I'm
Mm,
sure, like maybe not in the like current team, because they're not like as in the limelight and not like as good. But I'm
mm,
sure they could name like Brady at least up until this past
Gronk,
season,
yeah.
Edelman, who just retired. But like, so like I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for a 21-year-old girl to know who Saquon Barkley is if her
Mm.
family supposedly are Giants fans.
No,
Like, he's
yeah,
like
that's
huge
fair.
name in football.
Yeah, he's definitely a star, so that does help. It's just funny,
So
like
yeah,
it's just stuff like that where it's like, oh, this makes sense that Emily would know this, so I'm gonna say this, and then it somehow gets like lost in
yep.
translation to just who you're talking about. That's the kind of thing where it's like, since you don't know who you're talking to on the circle, like
Mhm.
because of the catfish aspect, it's like hard for me to imagine playing a successful game of the circle as a catfish.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I do think though that this was one of the like better ways that Emily could approach a conversation. My
Mm,
issue so far with Emily as a character is that I feel like historically on the circle, when men have played female catfishes, they've they've kind of played like more into like traditional like female stereotypes that
mm,
men would generally attribute to women, rather than playing like a real like three-dimensional woman. And you kind of see this a little bit last season on the US version with like Seaburn, aka Rebecca, where he takes a while to really ramp up into this character. You see it on the UK season 1 with Alex, aka Kate, and just like a number of cases where I think that there's maybe, because of like the way that they were socialized, men don't really like think about like women beyond just like very stereotypical qualities, and so they play like these very like timid female characters, and we see Emily being portrayed similar to how Kate was in UK season 1, as like a very unwilling to give an opinion, like a fence sitter, somebody who's like kind of easily rolled over and naive, and like these qualities are not positive, right? And they're not also qualities that are attributable to most women, and I think that that's a weakness that a lot of men have in the way that they portray female catfishes. And so if I were to go in the circle, I've talked about this before, if I were to play a catfish, I would probably play a female catfish. And I think that there is a way to play a woman as a man where you are a lot more like rough around the edges. You have like you're actually like a built out like 3-dimensional flawed human, and I don't really think that a lot of catfish portrayers really kind of think that all the way through.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting, because I hadn't necessarily considered that aspect, that the reason Jack is kind of a fence sitter in his actions and like conversations is because he's trying to play a more stereotypical, in his mind, female role. I kind of was just like attributing that to like, man, Jack is non-committal like to anything, which I think is his biggest flaw so far, obviously. Right. You know.
No, I think it's both. Well, this is like, you know, there are so many parallels here between how Jack has played Emily so far and how Alex played Kate in season 1 of the UK. And spoiler alert for that season, Kate does end up winning the season. So it is a winnable way to play, but there is a point where you have to put your foot down. You have to like kind of, you know, to use gendered terms, grow a pair, right? You have to like pick a side. You have to like exert some kind of opinion. You have to make somebody unhappy, right?
Yeah. And I get let's use this to segue. I know we're getting a little ahead, but let's use that to segue into Chloe, who is a very like self-assured, like alpha type personality, and you can see her getting incredibly frustrated with Emily, you know, in different conversations, and then especially in the episode 2, like influencer chat, where she's just like, just say what you're thinking, just tell me like the truth, and we can go from there. Like,
right.
So yeah, do we want to get into Chloe a little bit?
Yeah, we get into Chloe. We have Chloe here, who is a UK contestant playing on the American Circle, despite the Circle being initially a UK show. Very interesting. I assume it's because she was a contestant on Too Hot to Handle on Netflix. I believe that show primarily was promoted in the US, so it makes sense for cross-promotion purposes for even a British player on that show to be a player on the US version of The Circle. But yeah, we were introduced to Chloe. From my understanding, I haven't watched Too Hot to Handle. It's one of the reality shows I haven't watched. It's a short list.
Right.
I watched a little bit of Love is Blind, but I thought Love is Blind was a little boring, so I didn't go into Too Hot to Handle. But apparently Too Hot to Handle was more fun, so maybe I'll check it out. But the premise of that show is basically they got a bunch of really attractive, horny people, and they put them in like a compound, I guess.
Right.
And they all they had to do to win money was not hook up with each other.
Oh my! All right.
And
so it's like Temptation Island from.
Yeah, it's Temptation Island-esque, yes. Yeah. And as implied by Chloe in her opening thing, she did not fare well in this in this environment in terms of resisting temptation. And I want to basically the two kind of stereotypical like attributes they're immediately going to push on us for Chloe are that she's like kind of not very book smart, and that she's horny as hell, right?
Yeah.
So great, a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was really great casting, like a slam dunk so far. She's super entertaining, and like you said, she's from another Netflix show. So like Jenny, obviously she already likes The Circle, but when she saw Chloe was in it in the preview, she was like excited to see Chloe because Chloe was such a big character on Too Hot to Handle. So I definitely get why Netflix was like, I know this is a US version, but like this is good cross promotion for our brand. And so far Chloe has brought it. And impressed me a lot. She was 7th, the first ranking, and she was an influencer the second.
I think she was 6th.
She was 6th. Yeah, she was 6th.
Yes. And 6th to 1st. 6th to 1st.
So, like, I think she's great so far.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that, well, we'll get to it when we get all the way through episode 4, but I think she's in one of the best positions to end up being the winner of the season at this point. So, yeah, obviously she's doing great. She's very natural at forming relationships. She's incredibly likable. Most of the people, like most of the other players in the show, have very little negative to say about her. She's like playing a very forward and aggressive game, but it's not really coming off that way. And then we end up seeing at the very end of episode 4, she doesn't even really get any of the blame for what happens to Savannah. All of the blame gets shifted onto Emily. So like. I can't really argue with how she's playing so far, and yeah, she's been a lot of fun in terms of her like getting angry and yelling at the screen in conversations, particularly with Emily, who is like her number one ally, but also somebody that clearly frustrates her to no end, which is a lot of fun. I'm excited to see how that relationship continues. But yeah, she might not know about world history at all, but she's making history on The Circle right now.
Yeah, you don't need to know about that stuff to be a reality star. We'll put it that way. I think that's well established.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best players from the UK show, Freddie, famously went on a radio show and asked why we have to learn about World War II. So.
Yeah, why do we, Fred? Like, good question.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So that's kind of where we're at with Chloe. Well, I'm sure talk about her a lot more throughout this podcast. And then I think the next person we're introduced to is River, aka Lee.
Yeah. So that's what I have. This is interesting to me, Ben. Like. One, I love it when they cast older people on these shows, and The Circle is like such a good one because it's not a physical like competition show, and it is just always such a fun like fish out of water experience. And then of course interesting how he's a writer, so he's kind of creating this layered character of River who's somewhat based on himself and somewhat based on a friend. He's using a friend's picture, and then like a lot of fake backstory added in. He of course lays some stuff on pretty hard to start off. Yeah, like talking about being heartbroken a lot to start off was like very weird to do. I feel like for a first impression.
Yeah.
And because like even just like imagine like we went on Big Brother Survivor and you're like, hey, I'm really excited for this experience. I just got broken up with and it rocked my world. Terrible experience. Be like, all right, don't worry, that's not particularly necessary to know, but thanks, River.
So that's a lot to just to interact with. Like I've had interactions where I met somebody for the first time, and one of the first things they said to me was that it was the anniversary of their father's death, and nice. That's usually like I would say for anyone willing to go on one of these competition reality shows, not really the kind of first impression that is going to get somebody to be endeared to you, I guess.
Yeah. Like anything like that, anything like personal, I don't know if trauma is the right word, but like too forward about your personal life is going to put people on the back foot. And that's the last thing you want to do in one of these shows, to start off with someone like being pushed away from you, and then you have to make up that ground later.
Right. That's like a second or third conversation thing. You kind of have to build into that. You have to form some kind of like surface level rapport with a person before you start dumping all of your trauma onto them.
Yeah, and I mean, if it's fake, like the whole River character is, it is an important background detail to down the line build trust with someone. Like, let me tell you about this thing that happened to me that really sucked, but I'm trusting you. Yes. And that's why I'm telling it to you. So a little sloppy gameplay there, but I'm happy that he survived these two episodes, because I really want to see him continue to play.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there. This is kind of another example of what I said earlier of like catfish, like the players playing the catfish really off of the bat, just being really into the idea of just like putting everything they have created up for this catfish out there immediately so fast, and just like really overcompensating to try to sell this character, and like really overselling it to like an unnecessary level.
If I can make another very nerdy reference to Lost, like, would Sawyer have been that interesting if we found out his backstory in episode 1? Or was it way more interesting to meet Sawyer, like, see his character for, like, a bunch of episodes, and then get the flashback episode, and then you're like, that's why he's like this. And now I like am more connected to this character.
Yeah, I think that's the case for a lot of characters on Lost, and with the like in medias res, like flashback style storytelling, where you get to know them on a surface level, and then you find out the why they're so fucked up.
Right. Anyways, watch Lost, great show.
Yeah. Also Succession.
Yes, definitely watch Succession.
But back to the point. Now we're getting to our second to last initial player, somebody who will serve a large portion of these first 4 episodes. Terilisha, we're introduced to her. She is a substitute teacher from Texas, and she's a lion. She speaks her mind, as we'll find pretty soon after this. Yeah, and what are your initial thoughts on Terilisha?
Oh, I fucking love her. She is so awesome. Ben, you're a math guy. I am the exact opposite of a math guy. What does it mean that she came up with her own theory, or what was it, formula? I don't know. She was talking about like coming up with I don't know what that means, but it sounds smart as hell. I just don't understand.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought this was a little cringy. I feel like...
All right, so this is good perspective to get someone who knows, math well to talk on.
Yeah. I'll put my... this is the first time I've used my math degree since I got it 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. First of all, you wouldn't name a theorem after your first name. That's the first thing.
Okay.
My feeling is this is something that... like this feels kind of like a meme, right? It feels like something that she developed in school that was like tangential to something that already existed, but she like kind of came up with it single-handedly on her own, but it's already something that exists. Like this is something that like good math students, when they're like learning about things, like they'll sometimes be able to like derive formulas and ideas independently, and then like they're like, oh, this is a thing, and it makes them. It's a way to understand a concept better. But to like use it as like a bragging point on a reality show for me is a little cringy. I would never do that.
See, like this is good. This is like for the rest of the dummies like me in the audience. This is very good.
Yeah, it kind of comes off a little bit. It kind of comes off like she's fronting a little bit. That's like that's the way that doing something like that would come off to me
Okay,
as
all right,
somebody
this is
who
good.
has studied math.
Because like when she said that to me, I was like, wow, that's really smart.
Yeah,
I guess it sounds
yeah,
smart, but apart from that, I think it's good that we get the context. But she just like fucking like, what more could you ask for from a reality TV contestant? Like right off the bat, like
yeah.
bringing the drama, setting the tone, building out like the big storyline of this first 4 batch of episodes, and coming out victorious. Like, oh, I'm so excited to see her for however long she lasts in this.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, yeah, one of the best reality TV storylines in like modern times for me, and a lot of it is just to do with like how, how like uh, intensely Terilisha is going to want to like defend her honor here, and make sure that she comes out in the best light possible, and in the process, not only sabotage Savannah's game, but also heavily sabotage her own game.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. Like she won the battle, but she probably lost herself the war. That is the
yeah,
circle.
yeah. I will see. Maybe she can recover from here.
Mm.
She does have people who are allies to her that have clearly took the time to stand up for her.
Yeah.
And coming into now a 7, like we'll probably add new players soon. But coming into
Mm.
the 7, she has herself plus 3 relatively good allies. That's a 4 out of 7 situation. So I mean, I don't necessarily see her getting blocked in the near future, save some kind of twist or unforeseen circumstance. But yeah, definitely dug herself an unnecessary hole here in these first 2 episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But
great
we
television.
thank her for it. Yeah, for doing this for us.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll obviously get into the details and go through the specifics of the drama piece by piece and like exactly what happened. But firstly, we have our last contestant that we have to introduce here in episode 1. We have Courtney. What are your thoughts on Courtney, who is who is playing as himself but is lying about his profession of being basically an internet gossip journalist?
Yeah. So I mean, similar to Jack, as someone who also really likes to talk about stuff online. He has a gossip channel. I talk about reality TV. I don't think that's necessarily too different from one another personally. So I really like Courtney. I think he's super fun and really funny. Disappointed to see that he kind of fell on the wrong side of this split in terms of, Savannah getting blocked. But I do think he's planted enough like seeds to weather this and not just go down as an easy like, well, he was Savannah's ally, we need to get him out. I think he has more people who will have his back. What did you think about him?
Yeah, no, he's definitely a lot of fun. I was kind of confused as to why he cared so much about hiding his profession.
Mm.
I don't know if necessarily that's like a profession that would make me distrustful of somebody in the circle. I guess the idea is like, oh, I talk shit about people online for a living. So like that's not necessarily a person that you want to ally yourself with, because then you're gonna have in the back of your mind, oh, they're a person who talks shit for a living. Then maybe they're gonna go behind my back and talk shit about me. Like maybe that's the idea,
Yeah.
but I just don't understand why. It seems like one of those things where it's like a lot of people go on to reality shows and lie about their profession because they've built it up in their head so much that their profession makes them some kind of threat, right? We have Kaylin in BB Can 7 lying about being a medium or a psychic or whatever. She's like, oh, this is the reason that people are going to be distrustful of me is because I'm a psychic. And it's like, most people, in my opinion, are not going to care.
Or maybe yes, but not for the reasons you think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think that if he were honest about his job, that would kind of open up a lot more conversation opportunities. It would open up, we end up seeing somebody come into the circle, Lance Bass, as Lance Bass, and I feel like that would be an interesting way to have a conversation with somebody like Lance. From that perspective. So I think you just kind of close yourself off in a lot of ways, and you put this like onus on yourself to like have this unnecessary lie for very little reason, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I think we're both very firmly in the like just like don't lie about your profession. It's so unnecessary and like it's often followed up with the I need to tell everyone my real profession. And that's just so much worse and so avoidable. Like it's like I mean, we've seen it on plenty of reality TV shows. We've seen it in plenty of LRGs and things, you know, like it doesn't work and it makes everyone distrust you when you do inevitably be like, I have to be honest with you about this thing that doesn't matter, but because I lied about it, now things are weird.
Yeah. And like if you're going to do that, I feel like you would just be a catfish, right? Like if that's such a big like holdout to you, I feel like you just kind of gotta go the full Monty and be a catfish,
Yeah.
right? Like you kind of, we had on this last season of the UK Circle season 3, we had James acting as Gemma, where he was catfishing as an NHS nurse, and like because he is like a C-list celebrity or whatever in the UK, and so he wanted to hide his identity and also catfish as a nurse, and the ethics of that aside, you can like that at least serves a purpose, and it's like a part of a character where you're just lying about your job, and your replacement job is just barista, which is basically like it's the undecided of professions, right? Like it's just there's no connotative really assumptions you can make about a barista, really.
No, definitely not. There's so many people who are
Yeah,
so different who are baristas. Like
right,
there's not a stereotype really.
exactly. So that's like a placeholder, right? Like you might as well just have left it blank, and it would tell you exactly the same amount of information. So like when you're going that far out of your way to like hide your profession for like this kind of arbitrary reason, I just don't agree with that. I feel like you either have to go full catfish or no, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely. And then
But
if you for some reason lie about your job, do not tell people your real job. Eventually,
yes,
like just fully commit. You
yeah.
know.
We also see this kind of on season 1 of the U.S. version as well with Sean, where
Right. Yeah,
she
yeah.
lied about her she basically is herself, but with pictures of like a thinner girl, and
Mm-hmm.
then like 3 days in, she's like, I can't do this anymore. I have to tell everybody that I lied and that I'm actually much heavier. And then everyone's like, okay, well now I just don't trust you, right?
Yeah. And nobody would have cared. I
Right.
don't feel if she had just come in as herself. And I get it as a fellow fat person. I get it,
Yeah.
but like I think for that, I don't think people would have cared because it's like a social game.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I don't want to. I'm a guy too, so it is different. I don't want to like
Yeah.
say that, but
Right. Right. No, it is different, but I do think that like you have to be willing to commit on these
mm,
shows, and you have to really have like a concrete plan coming in. And if you don't have that concrete plan, you're going to get caught out, or you're going to end up in situations where you feel uncomfortable, or you feel like you want to reveal information, and it's never good. It almost never works out. So
no.
yeah, but I like Courtney as a person. He's very entertaining. He's very energetic,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm excited. I'm hopeful that this twist that we see at the end of episode 4 is not like too OP,
Oh, I
because
know. I'm so like on pins and needles waiting to see what's gonna
yeah,
happen here. It looks like a good like diary room. It reminds me of like a Big Brother diary room in there.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like intergalactic, whatever he said. But yeah, so I'm hopeful that it's enough for him to kind of like regain his footing without like it being so OP that it makes me like dislike him because I dislike the twist or anything like that. I really do like him.
Ben, can I ask you a question about this twist that Jenny
Sure.
like thinks she's like so normally on the circle you can go see whoever you want. But the added the
Yeah.
caveat of Savannah,
Yeah.
you have to go see the person you want to win. Did they do this so she wouldn't have a confrontation with Terilisha?
I hope not.
Okay.
It's possible they did.
Mm-hmm.
But on last season of the UK, apparently when Gemma got blocked, they actually made her go and have her confrontation with Manrika, who they had bad blood with each other. So I feel like, if anything, the Circle would want the opposite,
Okay.
where you would. So I think it might have been like a pre-planned twist that just happened to interrupt a potential interesting drama confrontation. Because yeah, obviously the best television would have been Savannah going to see Terilisha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't know if they were just like, oh boy, this is too
We don't want
confrontational.
to pop off.
Especially with like when the influencer chat was happening, they had a private conversation and she just dipped out of like, the conversation. I was like, oh boy, this is gonna be so bad when one of them get blocked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, my guess is it was just a pre-planned twist that probably was just poorly timed in terms of, kind of cock blocking us from some content. I don't even know if Savannah, if given the option, would have gone and confronted Terilisha. I think there's a chance she might have just gotten it either way. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. I just wanted to ask you that because I was like,
yeah,
that's a good point. They might have been worried, but since you have like way more knowledge about the Circle, you're like, no, they probably wanted that. It just happened.
Yeah. We'll talk about like the whole like confrontation, obviously, but like in the DMs. But I can't imagine why they wouldn't have wanted like a face-to-face confrontation. Like I doubt they would have worried too much about anything like popping off that would have been bad.
I'm sure there's like security like right outside the door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it was just poorly timed. But it was a fun and very important conversation that Savannah ended up having with Courtney. So
what was the craziest thing when she was having that? I was like, damn, this is good advice, Savannah. Where was this for yourself?
Like, she's like the friend that gives you great relationship advice and then goes out and like has the worst, most toxic relationships ever.
Right. So. I was like, God damn, like if you had just like done this yourself, you would not be in this position.
Yeah. No, I don't know. Well, yeah, we can talk about the advice she gives, which I agree is very good and very pointed advice. But first, let's go through episode 1. We'll get through episode 1 and 2 real quick so we can get to the meat. Episode 1, we have our first game, which you had referenced earlier, is like this decide which fact this person is about game. Not a ton to come out of this game. We learned that Savannah was on the U.S. robotics team, which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. We learned that Bryant earned made $10,000 or got $10,000 to get his friend off the streets, which was cool.
Yeah, I was thinking like with the robotics thing, like my dad, his school won like the championship one year of that. So I've been like, damn, that would be so crazy if I ended up in a show and someone was on it. I would have like this really unexpected connection to talk about it. So like, I thought that was cool, just from a personal level, that she did that. And also not surprised from the gender ratio that I saw on my dad's team that she was the only girl in the robotics club. It's pretty, nerdy guy club.
Yeah, no, as somebody who was on the robotics or in the robotics club in high school, it was definitely a huge sausage fest.
But it's really cool. Like, it's a really cool club. Having seen it for years, firsthand.
Oh, it's very chill, a lot of fun. The competitions are a lot of fun as well. But it sounds like Savannah was way more successful at it than I ever was. So that's very good for her.
Right. And we touched on it at the top when we were talking about Brian. I don't know if he chose this fact. I don't know how this works or if the Circle threw him under the bus. But, like, this is not the move if he got to choose the fact that could potentially be out here.
Yeah, I'm assuming that maybe they filled out profiles
Yeah.
with the producers before the show, and one of the questions was like, "Oh, name a fun fact about yourself that maybe people wouldn't know." And for going into the circle, you have to assume that anything you put in a form that you give the producers
Hmm.
could be revealed in a game to the other players.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, and what if it is like phrase like fun fact? That's like I'm really good at squash.
mhm.
Not a self-aggrandizing fact about yourself.
Well, that's just Brian's personality, right? He thinks that's a
Right.
fun fact.
I, yeah. Yeah.
So
Maybe I'm thinking too strategy headed to like relate to Bryant, but uh, not what I would have put, Ben.
yeah. And then the other one that we saw, I think, was Trevor, aka Delisa. Her partner's parents walked in. I assume on her. I assume this is a fact about her and not about her husband that she's using, based on how I
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
about it.
no, I think because she was like, yeah, that did happen.
Yeah. So her, while she was losing her virginity,
Mm,
her boyfriend at the time's parents walked in
mm,
on them, which
yeah,
is
it's a real
traumatizing.
family affair, unfortunately. Um, what a nightmare.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I feel like that's not something that if that happened to me, I don't know if I would be sharing that with the world
No,
on
no,
Netflix.
no.
But maybe it's something that you learn to laugh at.
Mm,
15 years later.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, I don't
Uh,
know what.
our heart goes
It's
out to her.
yeah. She seems like she's in a good place now. So obviously, it
Oh yeah,
wasn't
she's her life
terrible.
is great now, but like that moment was probably mortifying.
Yeah. I don't know how you really. What do you do in that situation? What's the reaction?
I don't know if there is one that's
Yeah.
like good. Like
Would you, would you rather to be the person whose parents walk in, or the person whose partner's parents walk in? Which would be worse?
it depends how cool the partner's parents are. You know, are they gonna keep this
Yeah.
on the DL or are they going to tell your parents? Because
Yeah.
then if they tell your parents, then you got to go home and face that. So it's like a
Mhm.
double. You know.
Yeah. 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 I don't know. I feel like as a guy, I would prefer for it to have been my parents, but maybe as a
Mm,
girl, it might be better in the opposite. I don't know.
yeah. Let us know in the comments down below.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Hit us up on Twitter and the YouTube comments. Which if this has happened to you, you could give us some context as
Mm,
to how traumatizing it was,
yeah.
and on a scale of 1 to 10, and then tell us whether you would have been more or less traumatized if the
Mm.
opposite had happened.
And of course, like thin on the details, not a letter to Penthouse. We need like the fallout, not the play by play.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We you can start the story as they're walking in. We don't need the foreplay.
Oh man.
But yeah, this is a pretty fun like first game. Like this was definitely not the kind of game that's really gonna to blow up into any sort of real drama, as we'll see in the
Oh
Truth or
yeah,
Dare
no.
game later in the episodes.
Mm,
But yeah, we got to learn a little bit better. Like, this is like an icebreaker game to learn about everyone a little bit better.
yeah. Oh man. That
Yeah.
yeah. That was a fun turn, but that took a little like tangent of us going off. Oh man.
Yeah, yeah, and then segue to our first ratings of the season. And we have our girls chat as well, which is
Yeah.
very important as a setup, where we have Savannah um, being the first one to bring up that she is suspicious of Trevor.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And who
and
knew this would be the downfall of her game?
yeah, I mean, this was very forward to bring up in a chat with three other people.
Mm,
Uh, like usually, you want to let other people kind of be the one to voice suspicions early on, and then just be
mm,
like the person who's like adding on to like, oh yeah, I feel the same way.
mm,
This is how I felt thus and thus, as like Terilisha did, and then like Emily to like a lesser extent did.
mm.
But yeah, definitely going to be bad given what happens next, to have pretty much the only impression that she's given to this girl gang chat, that she is suspicious of Trevor, thinks he might be a fake or a catfish or something because of the lingo that he's using, how he's saying, what's the 411? Like, what is this, 1990?
Okay, so I want to talk about that. Like, am I just old, Ben? Because if someone said 411, I'd be like, people don't say that much, but like, I know what it means. Like maybe it's just like from growing up watching like, 90s sitcoms and stuff. Yeah. But I wouldn't have been like, whoa, what? No one has ever said that before.
I do think it wouldn't really it probably wouldn't set off any antennas with me, but I definitely also feel like it's kind of a very 90s saying.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
It definitely, but like, Delisa is not lying about her age, right? Mm-hmm. She's 32, and she's pretending to be Trevor, who is also 32 on his bio. So, I don't know. I feel like 32 is a reasonable age to say something like, what's the 411?
Yeah, she probably grew up watching shows where that was like a thing that was said.
Yeah. And apparently, I'm not from the Bronx, but apparently it is like a more common saying in the Bronx. So take that with a grain of salt, of course. But, it makes sense as well. I do think that was interesting to be the thing that got the ball rolling for like, oh, Trevor might be a fake, given that, that's not actually that's something that Trevor easily could have also said if he was real and in the circle, seemingly. So,
yeah. People are just way too like paranoid, I think, on the day one.
Oh yeah, and this also not only because of the way it pops off later with what Savannah ends up doing, but this creates some immediate tension between the girls, and particularly Savannah and Chloe, who had spent her entire first chat with the circle group just like being horny on Maine, simping over Trevor, because he's literally the only like straight guy in the circle, really, outside of Bryant, who is like kind of a head case. So, like, and after Bryant leaves, we have Lance Bass coming in, and so of the four men in the circle, three of them are openly gay, and the other one is a woman.
Yeah, so not to take anything away from Trevor, he is a very good-looking guy.
No, for sure, yeah.
Right, it makes sense that Chloe was so on that.
It does feel like Chloe, who has being horny on Maine as one of her personality traits. Like, I feel like the producers were kind of setting her up here, where like the most eligible guy she could flirt with is a woman catfishing as a guy.
Right. I mean, maybe they're protecting her from herself.
I mean, what's worse, her like crashing and burning in a relationship in the circle, or her succeeding in a relationship in the circle with a guy who's actually a girl, and then finding out about it after? I think the second is worse.
It's worse, yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
Coming off of UK season 3, that was very bad.
I think too, she's already in the Truth and Dare. She's, like, had the thing where it's like, I met a guy and booked a flight to France with him in the same night. It's like, okay, we gotta reel this girl back in.
Yeah, definitely. She's down bad. She's very thirsty. So.
Oh man.
I feel like Trevor could have given her nothing back, and she still would have gone for it. But Trevor definitely did feed into the flirting a lot. And so this is pretty much the only real like major chat that we see headed into the ratings. We also see like a little bit of Savannah bonding with Courtney, and I think some like Terilisha bonding with like River, maybe, or was that second episode? That might have been the second episode after the influencer came through. But this was the main important chat getting into the ratings, and we get our ratings. Number 8, Bryant.
Yeah, no surprise there. Honestly, like the second Bryant walked into the circle, I was like, oh, this guy is in trouble. And it
Mm,
was just a whole 2 episode arc of Bryant is in trouble.
yep. Yeah, no, definitely could not really get his footing. We did also see, we kind of zoomed over it, the conversation that Bryant had with Courtney, where the first conversation they had together, Bryant was pledging his undying loyalty to Courtney across, the universe and multiple lifetimes.
Yep.
Courtney like, oh, all right, we'll take that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say no, but it's very forward.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely not surprising. Number 7, Emily. A little surprising given
Yeah,
the girl
definitely a
game
little
chat.
surprised. The
Um,
girls didn't come through in that aspect at all for her.
yeah, I do think that she probably didn't, give off maybe a strong impression to some of the guys, maybe like Courtney or Bryant. They might not have ranked Emily particularly high, or Trevor even. So I probably contributed to it. And there's also like this idea where she's playing very safe and not really giving people a lot. So there's like this kind of air of like, oh, maybe she's the catfish. Like you have to assume one of the 4 girls is probably a catfish, and I think she's the most likely one just based off of first impressions. So maybe that's something that a lot of people have thought about. And then number 6, we have Chloe, who also I was surprised to see ranked pretty low. Again, from the girls' chat, the girl gang chat, you would expect the girls, because they made this kind of formal bond, to have more consistently rated each other highly.
Right.
But that didn't seem to have been the case. And then tied for 4th, we have Courtney and River, which I think makes sense. They're pretty middle of the road. They end up kind of in the middle of the road. And then number 3, we have Trevor, who, despite being kind of called out as being potentially fake, he does have multiple people kind of putting him high. He has Chloe putting him high. And so, he ends up in the 3rd place slot. And then we have our influencers. Number 2, Savannah, and number 1, Terilisha.
Yeah, so this should have been a very like easy, drama free, like slam dunk of influencer responsibilities for them, and it was not.
Yeah, no, this was way messier than it should have been. So, firstly, first we have a quick chat with Savannah and Trevor, which ends up being incredibly important, where Savannah and Trevor bond over the fact that Savannah comes from a single-parent household. Trevor is portraying himself as a single parent, and also Terilisha herself was a child of a single-parent household. So that's something that they bond pretty heavily over, and like family values and that sort of thing. And Savannah quickly changes her mind about Trevor here.
Yeah. Pretty much the worst thing she can do.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
this not protecting Chloe was the end of her game, basically.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It was not great. This is the first point of this is like the spark that lights the fuse that causes the explosion later. Right? Is this conversation with Trevor where Savannah changes her mind, and then when the 2 influencers are given the option to publicly save one person each, we have Terilisha saving Emily, which is understandable given the girls' chat, and the expectation would then be that Savannah would save Chloe. All the girls are safe, and we're all a big happy family. But then, with no explanation up front given to the girls, who she had just spent a conversation trash-talking Trevor to, she ends up saving Trevor based off of this conversation that she just had one-on-one with him. And there's a lot of confusion, understandably.
Yeah, as there should be.
And this is... Do you think this was the mistake, or do you think the mistake happened later?
I think it could have worked out if it weren't Chloe being the one snubbed.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a less, intense or like more strategic player, like, because I was thinking, like, if I'm in Chloe's shoes and I don't get saved when I kind of expect it to be, I would have reached out to Savannah and been like, yo, like, that's so smart. Like, we have this alliance, but we don't
You're
want to
gonna
be
hide
like
it.
too open about it. And
Yeah.
you're making the decision on who goes anyways, so it's really not a big deal. And like,
Yep.
don't feel like there's any animosity. Like, I see what you did. I think it was a great move. I would
Mm.
have done the same thing. But Chloe is not that type of a player, and because of that, it kind of got away from Savannah uh, in the sense that like Chloe was pretty much fully out on Savannah, and even like not being blocked didn't necessarily help that. And they butted heads in the DMs in the next episode over it. And I mean, I guess she could have also been like, hey, Chloe, like, I just wanted to reach out and be like, here's my rationale for it. I hope that's okay. If you feel like I should have come to you first with this, like, definitely in the future, I will do that.
Mm.
I'll be more open. It was just like in the moment, I didn't expect to have to save somebody, and I didn't want to expose our alliance.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I think that you could definitely question whether or not saving Trevor was correct, but I think the way that Savannah handled the aftermath was significantly worse than the decision itself. You see in a lot of the conversations afterwards, she says, "Oh yeah, we had a very strong connection. We formed this connection," but she doesn't really go into any detail about what that connection is. It could be inferred that this connection could have been like flirtatious even when it wasn't, and especially given that Trevor had flirted with Chloe before, that's just like kind of asking for conflict there. Um, there wasn't really like any sort of real apology given to Chloe.
Yeah.
It was very kind of like surface level in terms of like more of just like making excuses rather than actually giving like an apology and explanation. And then also we'll talk about her, like the way she handles herself when it comes to Chloe in the influencer chat itself with Terilisha was very bad. So I do think that while the decision itself was like questionable, and obviously if she had just saved Chloe, none of this would have happened to begin with. Most of the mistakes, like the like more egregious mistakes, in my opinion, happened in her handling of like the fallout rather than the initial initiating act to begin with.
Yeah, I think you want to, if you're a good like strategic player, you want to get ahead of these things, and she did not do that at all.
Yeah.
She didn't even go to Chloe. Chloe came to her, which is
Yep.
like so much worse.
Or even worse, Chloe went to Emily to talk shit, and then was like, "Okay, now I'm going to bring in Savannah and
Forgot
try
that
to
Emily
hash
was
this
in
out."
this. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, Emily was hoping that people would forget that she was in the chat too. It seemed.
Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, this is not good. This is not good.
Yeah, she was like, "I want to be a lurker here. Like, I don't want to be in this."
Yeah, if he could have liked comments, he probably would have done that.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
I'm here but not here.
right. Yeah, and you could definitely tell when Chloe was like, "I want to bring Savannah," and like Emily was like, "I don't know, but this seems like a not good idea." But she didn't want to say that out loud, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, definitely not being the one to approach Chloe, not really giving any like full reasoning, not really apologizing, not really like reaffirming the loyalty in any way that came off as authentic. Um, you know, excluding Terilisha, so Terilisha doesn't have the context even of the like fake conversation that she had with Chloe and Emily. There's just a lot of mistakes headed into this influencer chat that Savannah makes, and then the mistakes only escalate and continue. But first, we have our game of episode 2. Our 4 up for elimination, up for blocking players, our at-risk players have to make a poem about one of the influencers and share it with the group.
Yeah. So, not great poems. Lee's was at least like academically like well formed, but very classic. You know, everyone else was just kind of all over the place in terms of the amount of syllables in each line and kind of being very loose with what rhymes and what doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't think Brian's poem being bad hurts him in the sense that I don't think he went home because of this, but like I don't think anyone really helped themselves either.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a very odd poem about Savannah that he wrote, where he's like, Savannah, banana, Americana, Savannah, Savannah, banana. And then he talks about, like, you know, I'm your robot and you can teach me to love. And, like, very awkward. But there were, I think that of the four, Courtney's was probably the best. In that it wasn't actively bad. The others were just like not the best. Chloe's wasn't too bad either. But I had an issue with Rivers, not because of it being, you know, formatted poorly, or like if it were just kind of like a standalone poem, it would be, you know, nicely written. Right, it's definitely, you know, big English major vibes, right?
Yes. Yep.
But the content of the poem was atrocious from River. We came back. We talked about this earlier with Lee's portrayal of River. He has this three-dimensional character that he theoretically could build out, but right now River is so one note. The entirety of River's personality is, I just got cheated on and broken up with a week ago.
Yeah.
And a poem that's supposed to be about Savannah, he makes entirely about himself and his failed relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, it was not great. This is just a strange challenge to force them to do. But, you know, I don't think it ended anyone's game. I don't think it helped anyone's game.
No, it was just fun. It was fun TV to like see them try to make these poems or like pseudo raps, because, you know, it was like kind of this weird situation with I think Bryant was the one who was like kind of, or was it Bryant or Chloe? I think Chloe, right? Chloe made it more like a rap.
Like a rap, yeah.
Yeah, which I think was fine. I think it worked out. You know, you don't need the way these games work with the circle. It's not about winning the games, right? It's about utilizing the games to further your social position, right? The games are a trap, right? It's like I don't know how to really. There's not really a very good like analogy I can make here, but it's just like the games are like a distraction. They're a trap. They're designed to make you mess up, and the way you win the games isn't by actually like winning the way that the game is set up. It's by coming out of the game in a better position than you came into it, or at least like not coming out in a worse position.
Yeah.
I think that even if Chloe is breaking the format of the rules of this game, actually you're supposed to write a poem, not a rap. You know, I think that she did a good job of not harming herself socially, which is the point.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Let's get into it. We've spent way too much time with the setup and the foreplay here. All right, we got to get into the part where the parents walk in.
Yeah. I was about to say the same thing. It's time for the parents to bust that door down.
Yeah. We get to our influencer chat. Like, before this, we have this conversation we referenced earlier with Brian and Terilisha, where they form a bond. We have a conversation with River and Terilisha, where they form a bond, which becomes important, and a conversation with, we had to talk about the conversation earlier, where Courtney had formed a bond with Savannah. They have very similar tastes in music. They're very similar personality types, so they clicked very quickly. And so these are all very key factors headed into this influencer chat. And
Right.
so we enter in here, Terilisha and Savannah. They have 4 options on who they can block. We have Courtney, who is very close now to Savannah. We have River and Bryant, who have just both formed very good relationships with Terilisha. And we have Trevor, or not Trevor, we have Chloe, who is there over Trevor, who probably should have been there, who has now a relationship with them both. And this is kind of where saving Trevor created this conflict based off of this rift, of this imbalance of like allies that Terilisha and Savannah have, where Emily and Chloe at this point are kind of like shared allies between Terilisha and Savannah. And as Savannah has formed a one-on-one relationship with Trevor and a one-on-one relationship with Courtney, and Terilisha has done the same with Bryant and River. And by saving Trevor, Savannah is basically like cheating the system, where she is going to go into this chat with an advantage where she should now be able to block somebody that Terilisha is closer to than her, just because of the way the numbers work out. And so in that way, saving Trevor was actually probably good if she had handled it correctly. Because she comes out of this influencer chat ahead on allies, theoretically.
Yeah.
So yeah, we start out the chat. Terilisha obviously coming in with the intent of trying to block Courtney, who is the only one of the 4 that she hasn't really formed any kind of bond with. Savannah's coming in with the intent of hoping to block River, who she has probably formed the least amount of bond with of the 4. But right off the bat, they have this confrontation where they're each trying to block their basically number 1 person.
Yep.
And they're each like, okay, we can agree they're both off the table for each other. And this is kind of setting the stage here for how this chat's going to go.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a bad. And she even said, like, Terilisha probably thinks I'm a bitch right now. And then it, like, cut to, like, you bitch.
Yeah.
Which was great. Wonderful. Yeah, no, I mean, Savannah played it strategically right and socially wrong, I guess would be a good way to put it.
I agree.
And it ended up in, Bryant's the victim of circumstance. Nothing necessarily he did himself that was egregiously horrible. I mean, he definitely had a lot of faults that put him in the position, but it wasn't like they both were like, we need to get him out of here. It was just like, okay, I will agree to let Bryant be the one to go.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's essentially going to come down to one of Terilisha's 2 people is going to go between River and Bryant, and she gets to choose like which one she values more, and she chooses to value River more. That's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah.
But before we get to the talk about Bryant, we have this setup with Savannah airing out her worries about Chloe after the less than perfect chat that Chloe, Emily, and Savannah had before the influencer chat, where Savannah correctly is feeling like Chloe might not have her back 100% after her not saving her and instead saving Trevor. And Terilisha takes this as disloyalty to the girl gang and potentially Savannah even trying to make a case for Chloe to be the one to be blocked. When I don't actually think that Savannah really wanted Chloe to be blocked, but she was just kind of saying too much of what's on her mind because she trusted Terilisha too much. And she gave her this information of like, I feel like there could be a wall up between me and Chloe now because of this. And, I don't know how we're going to move forward with that. Definitely not the best. We kind of saw this as well with Savannah in the first chat, where you really don't want to be the one to bring up, issues or to bring up that there could be conflict or there could be something, crazy going on or something sketchy going on. Like, it's just never good to show your hand that early, especially to somebody like Terilisha, who has a lot of social power in the game.
Right.
Yeah, what do you think? Do you think, because what I want to do in this podcast is I want to pinpoint the moment that Savannah lost the game, because she made a dozen mistakes, right?
Right.
What was the mistake that broke the camel's back? Is it this? Is it her airing out too much of her worries about Chloe's loyalty to Terilisha in this chat?
So I think personally it was the saving Trevor and putting Terilisha in this position to have to cut one of her people that she felt close to, and also, like, this should have been an easy run for them, and it should have built trust. Like a first vote in Survivor where you're like, okay, this is our alliance, but now our alliance is, like, formed because we voted together. This should have been that, but she, like, made it weird and didn't explain her actions in a way that drove them so far apart that there was probably no way to make up for it after this, right? Like, do you think she could have come back the next day? And even in the Truth and Dare game where, like, shade was being thrown, do you think she could have, instead of, like, addressing it head on in front of everybody, she could have just let it slide and then talked to her one-on-one and smooth things over, and kind of, I don't know if, like, played dumb in the sense like, hey, like, I'm sorry if I made you feel like I was dominating, you know, the way the influencer chat went. That certainly wasn't my intention. You know, I noticed, like you said, that comment, which puts me on back foot, but I still, like, I want to work with you. Do you think she could have recovered from this, or no? Do you think it was all down? Because she did not recover, and she definitely ended up on the wrong side of the, you know, rankings, and then it was pretty much GG from there. But, like, was there any salvaging it after this point, or no?
I think that the moment for me where it becomes unsalvageable is what we'll talk about next, which is after Bryant is blocked in the circle chat where they talk about his goodbye video. Where I think if Savannah takes responsibility there for being the voice to block Bryant, I don't see that being a bad thing. And I think that would have given that would have not made Terilisha as upset, upset to the point where she goes off in the Truth or Dare game later. But yeah, I do think that, like I said, like, Savannah makes so many mistakes. I think that this is almost the point where it becomes unsalvageable to me. But I think that the straw that breaks the camel back for me is in the chat after Bryant is blocked. They show his video. Savannah is like, "Oh, this was a very hard decision for us," and basically trying to make it seem like it was a pair decision between the two of them, even though it was mostly her. And then Terilisha comes back to try to protect her own sense of honor or whatever, and says, I didn't want to see Bryant go, and Savannah correctly interprets this as Terilisha trying to dodge responsibility and put all the blame onto her. But who cares, right? Right? At this point, it doesn't matter on both sides. Who cares, right? But especially on the way that Savannah handles it from here. When you block somebody in the circle as an influencer, you're not only blocking somebody, you're saving all of the people you didn't block.
Right.
And for those people, it's more important that you saved them than you blocked this other person that they don't give a shit about. Yeah. Like, why do Courtney, River, and Chloe give any kind of a shit about Bryant getting blocked. If anything, if you take credit for being the one that pushed Bryant out, that means that you were a voice in support of Chloe, Courtney, and River, and you were like, no, I do not want those three to be blocked. I want Bryant to be blocked, and I made it happen. That's showing that you're a valuable person to those three. If you're the person who's like going to be the one to put your foot down in these influencer chats and make sure that your people are protected, that's a good value to have in an ally. I don't see why so many influencers are so quick to want to like dodge responsibility for the blocking. Like, I guess it's mostly going to be like guilt. Like they feel guilty that they're caused somebody to lose the game, especially when they find out Bryant is a real person and like he was like genuine. And especially from, I guess, Terilisha's perspective, she didn't want Bryant to go. Like, she really actually didn't want him to go, and she did form a good relationship with him. But nobody really knows that that's the case, except potentially Savannah. Like, nobody was involved in that conversation. So it doesn't give you any value to show, like, oh, I actually had a very good relationship with Bryant. We had a good conversation, and then I agreed to let him get blocked. That's not good.
Right.
So I think that the way that they both, as influencers, handled the post blocking was the most egregious to me, and I think that was the point of no return.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think, like you said, I guess for future influencers, even if you feel bad, like, oh, this person was real, you can basically say like, well, you know, I'm. It's too bad that he was real. He seemed too good to be true, and like everyone else who stayed, we felt was just more genuine. Like came off more genuine, and we wanted you here.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. You saw it as like, I would have like I'm sad to see him go, but it would have been even worse for me if anybody else had gone instead. Right. Really sell it that you care more about the people who stayed than the person who's not in the game anymore. That doesn't matter.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
So yeah, I think that was the biggest mistake in like a series of mistakes from Savannah and ultimately from Terilisha as well. And just like handling that and like how you really can get value from the influencer position. Like the value isn't as much in blocking somebody unless you like really take out a big threat. The value is in the social capital you can build because of the people that you save. And neither of them really capitalized heavily on that, I feel.
Yeah. So, yeah. GG, Bryant. We hardly knew you.
Yep. He goes to see River. They bond. He doesn't seem too broken up about the fact that River is a fake.
Right. I mean, honestly, like, you gotta go into any, like, when you're meeting someone situation of, like, there's a good chance this person is gonna be some person I've never seen before. Like,
right.
So, I don't think it's that big of a deal on the circle.
No. Yeah, no, it was more fun. They had a good conversation. Bryant gave some good advice to Lee about, you know, you gotta bring some more genuineness to the character of River. You have to, like, show yourself a little bit more, which I do think is very good advice for Catfish players to, like, really bring their own aspects of their own personality into the character, because that's the easiest way to sell the character as being genuine, is to kind of play like a fictionalized version of yourself that's through this vessel of a character you've created that has like different other kinds of traits associated with it. And I think that is something that Lee as River is not doing well right now. So I think that's definitely good advice.
Yeah, no, definitely. So yeah, I guess for these next two episodes, how do we approach? Do we do it blow by blow? We've kind of like covered stuff and then come back.
Yeah,
so how do you want to do this?
I think we could do a blow by blow and just try to stay on the rails as much as possible about like how we have to stay on the rails when we describe how this goes off the rails.
Okay, sounds good.
So we come back. We also are at the very end of episode 2, I believe, introduced to our new player that is going to be entering the circle, and they're shown a picture and a name, and it is Lance Bass, and about half of them recognize him.
Yeah, I wonder, like, if I would have out of context. Like, if it said Lance Bass, I'd probably been like, oh, yeah, that's the guy from NSYNC. But just Lance with a picture, I don't know if I would have been like, oh, that's the guy from NSYNC. I'm not the biggest NSYNC fan.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was a pretty big NSYNC fan back in the day. I probably would recognize him as well, also because Lance Bass is he's pretty in touch with a lot of these competition reality shows. Like, he's talked about in the past about how, like, you know, if they did like a Celebrity Survivor, he would potentially be interested. Like, he's very into like this genre of show, and like I think that I would have not only recognized him, I think that I probably would have leaned toward believing that it was him, because the Circle's a pretty quick show. It's only a few weeks, and like I feel like Lance Bass doesn't have a ton going on right now.
Yeah, especially if it's filmed too. Like during
COVID, yeah.
Yeah, why not?
And like I feel like he is the type of person to, like, you know, say yes to this kind of opportunity. And even on top of that, further, you kind of saw this in the Celebrity UK circle, where these two radio producers were playing as will.i.am, and a lot of the other celebrities were like, "Is will.i.am really here? Would he do this?" But they were like, "But who would be dumb enough to catfish as will.i.am? Like, why the fuck would we do that?" And I feel like that's kind of where I would be, where it's like,
doesn't will.i.am have a Twitch stream? Like,
he might. I feel like that's a little bit different.
He's busy. He's too busy.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's kind of how I would be in the circle, where I would see it was Lance Bass, and I would be like, I wouldn't be shocked if Lance Bass did this. But on top of that, who in their right mind would come on the circle catfishing as Lance Bass? Why would that be a thing that you do? What do you gain from doing that? It feels just strictly worse than being yourself if you're anyone.
I mean, so it's hard too, where there are celebrity versions. If you're like a big Circle fan, you know there are celebrity versions. So it's like, does that mean he'd be less likely to come on a regular version or more likely to come on a regular? Like, I don't know. And then it kind of like kneecaps Lisa's chance of winning, I feel like, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Like,
no, I don't think there's any chance that Lisa, aka Lance Bass, wins this season. Like, who is going to let a millionaire celebrity, even if they're like, you know, no offense to Lance Bass, I was a big NSYNC fan back in the day. He's kind of washed up at this point, but like, who would let a celebrity like that win a civilian game show with a cash prize at the end? There's no way.
And then it's like, on top of that, like, I would be like, either it's Lance Bass or it's like his family member, because how would someone get the permission to use like Lance Bass's photos and stuff?
Yeah.
Like, this had to be cleared with Lance Bass, presumably.
Yeah.
You know, like, so I wouldn't think it was catfish either. But I'd also be like, Lance can't win. I'm not going to let Lance Bass win, you know? At least it didn't do herself any favors by being like, oh, I'd use the money to fund an NSYNC tour. Was Justin Timberlake not a part of NSYNC? No. I think maybe he would have the money to start the tour, Lance.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you know, he's just assuming that JT wouldn't be involved because he has, you know, he actually has better things going on probably.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, even Lance Bass would have the money to probably fund the tour.
Right, yeah.
Well, obviously, Lisa intends it as a joke, but there's no, like, LOL, no haha, no, like, winky face, no, like, indication in terms of, like, tone indicators on the text itself that it's intended as being, like, not serious. And so everybody takes it seriously, because why not? Why wouldn't you not take it seriously when there's no indication it's not serious?
Yeah,
it's very hard to indicate sarcasm in text.
Right. And it's so different to me than like Jimmy Johnson playing Survivor. Like Jimmy Johnson's a multimillionaire, but like I don't feel like he's a celebrity in the same way Lance Bass is. Does that make sense? Like Lance Bass was like a superstar pop star. Jimmy Johnson is extremely famous to people who know football, but not like.
So not Trevor.
I was talking to Jenny about that, and she was like, "Yeah, I have no idea who Jimmy Johnson was, other than he was on Survivor." You know, you know, it's way different than Lance Bass. It's just from being in NSYNC and probably being the second most notable member of NSYNC.
Oh, for sure, yeah, definitely the second most notable member after Justin Timberlake. I don't know. It perplexes me. Like the reasoning that Lisa gives is like, oh, you know, I work for Lance and he's an awesome, fun, cool guy. And it's like, but like you can be a catfish as an awesome, fun, cool guy who isn't Lance Bass, right? Like you can take aspects of personality traits you like from Lance and make a new fake character that isn't a multimillionaire celebrity.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, and it also played into, was it Terilisha was like, are you gonna play for charity or yourself? Because like this is putting us in like as just normal people in a really bad position. If you're like gonna be like, I'm gonna play for charity, it's like cool, I get to look bad because I'm playing for myself, or like, you know, Trevor, like I'm playing as a single dad who like that is already a thing that is like, oh, will someone give the money because single dad, you know, like she in real life is playing to give a better life for her daughter, you know, where Lance Bass, you know, we saw a similar thing with Frankie Grande and a very famous like confessional of like Zach Rance being like, well, just give him the money then. He's playing for charity. How do we compete with that? It's a very unfair like situation for everyone else to be in, because like, in my opinion, you're not a bad person for voting out a celebrity, even if they're playing for charity. You came onto the show to win the money.
Yeah.
Just because money is like a taboo, like motivating factor doesn't, like in normal life to some people, doesn't like necessarily mean it should be a taboo motivating factor for a game that's about winning a bunch of money, you know?
Yeah. And this is something we also saw in last season of the UK season 3, where again we have James playing as Gemma, where Gemma is a character of an NHS nurse, and her as her character, and also James in real life as like a pseudo celebrity in the UK, is vocal about saying that he would give half of the winnings to the NHS, which like again puts the other contestants in a very weird spot where it's like you don't want to be the asshole to like vote out the nurse who's playing to like give money to the NHS, right?
Yeah, I think like in any like situation of any social game with that, I definitely would be like kind of trying to plant the seeds like, is that an unfair position to put us in?
Yeah.
Like, we're not bad people for wanting to win a game that we signed up for. Like,
yeah, we all need the money, right?
Yeah, right. Like, I would definitely be the person who's like trying, not outright saying this is bad that she did this or he did this, but being like, is like trying to get other people to think like, is it unfair that we're being put in this position? Which it is extremely unfair that we're being put in this position.
Yeah, no, and this is definitely like we don't get a ton outside of this like brunch with Bass situation they have going on where he's introduced, because there's so much other drama that kind of takes the forefront. But now that drama is kind of sort of resolved itself at the end of episode 4, I assume that Lance Bass and his intentions and like how the other players are going to handle him will probably take a forefront in the next few episodes. So I'm very interested to see how that sort of plays itself out.
Yeah, and it was especially like because the new players are safer around. It's like we're not even going to get into this right now because there's no point.
Yeah.
Like,
he's not going to be rated, or he's not like going to be up for blocking. So like, there's no reason to really kind of create any sort of anti-Lance, scenarios. And there's other stuff going on that's taking up these people's attention as well. So definitely something that's on the back burner, and I'm curious how it's going to play out.
Yeah, no, me too.
All right,
yeah, let's get into it.
Get into the truth or dare. Truth or dare.
Yeah.
A game that has never caused issues ever in the history of society. Truth or dare.
Good, clean fun, always.
Yep.
Everyone leaves happy.
Yeah, as Emily or Jack puts it, this is back in middle school. You might be able to hold a girl's hand off of Truth or Dare.
That was so funny. That was such a good line.
Yeah.
So Ben, did I miss this? Is there any motivating factor to do the dares? Like there's no penalty if you take a dare and you don't do it. No one will know. Like, Courtney didn't have to put anything on. Like, yeah, dare. Okay. I'm just going to sit here. Although there was, like, one of the other dares was, like, expose vital information. So I don't know, like, how is that any different from truth?
Sure. Yeah, I dare you to. This is something that happened in Truth or Dare as well, where it's like, oh, I choose dare to avoid having to do a truth. It's like, okay, I dare you to tell the truth.
Yeah, that shouldn't be how it is.
Yeah. No, definitely. Definitely picking dare and then just not doing it because there's no way to track whether or not you're doing it. It's just like must play, obviously. If you're not like Savannah and Terilisha and intentionally picking truth specifically so you can stir up shit on purpose, which is obviously bad from like a strategy perspective. Picking dare is just obviously right, and there's no reason to do it. I mean, Courtney, he did it seemingly just to entertain himself, but like you can just not do it and lie, right? The game doesn't matter.
It was so hard putting all those shirts on, guys, when you're just like lounging on the couch. Yeah.
Well, this is something in Circle UK Celebrity where they had to run a marathon with a pedometer in their hand, and they had to like self-report the amount of steps that they did, and so we have like somebody playing as like a catfish, and they just didn't do it, and they just like made up a number. Like there's no incentive to actually do it.
Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah. So, again, these games are a trap. They're a distraction, right? Mm-hmm. The point of the game is not to win them. The point of the game is to come out of it unscathed or hopefully even better socially or positioned in the game. And on that note, we have, I believe, does Terilisha go first? I believe Terilisha goes first in the Truth or Dare.
Yeah.
And the question is, like, who is the biggest game player? Or was that the question to Savannah? I can't keep track of which one was which.
I don't remember exactly. I just remember it being like a below.
Yeah. I don't remember the prompts exactly. There was like who was the biggest game player and who was like the least trustworthy or something like that. Either way,
some order and
or like who was like the least likely to have your back in the circle. Like, they're regardless of what the prompts were like. Who is the biggest piece of shit, right? Basically,
right? Yeah.
And they say each other. What it comes down to. We start out. Terilisha calls out Savannah, and the reason that Terilisha gives is Savannah had made a commitment to Chloe, did not follow through on it by saving her, and then in the influencer chat said that she was considering blocking Chloe, and then on top of that, afterwards, she made it seem like Terilisha was also to blame for blocking Bryant. That's the gist of Terilisha's qualms or the reasons that Terilisha does not like Savannah, which are defensible reasons. Whether or not it's correct to air them out here is up for debate. But
sure, debate. I don't think it's advisable to air your dirty laundry in the public chat ever. Yeah. But that's just me, someone who's watched way too much reality television.
Yeah. We find out, in the circle, the airing dirty laundry in the circle chat. It's kind of like calling a house meeting on Big Brother.
Yeah.
It's never good for the people involved, whether you're in the right technically or not. You're basically dragging the person that you're calling out and yourself down to hell together in a handbasket. And that's kind of what we end up seeing here. Savannah gets her question next, and it's like, they ask her, who's the biggest piece of shit on the planet? And she says, oh, it's Terilisha, of course. And she's like, she tried to blame me solely for the Bryant thing, is what her thought process is, and now she's calling her out in this circle chat.
Terilisha blamed me for this, and the worst part is it was my fault.
Yeah.
Like... Oh man, it's just no good.
Yeah. This is why I'm confused. I've seen a lot of people on like social media saying like, "Oh, are you team Terilisha or team Savannah?" And it's like, okay, well they both made a number of mistakes in the game, but objectively, Terilisha is way more in the right in terms of what they're actually saying. Like Savannah did, save Trevor with no good explanation or reasoning, did express doubts about Chloe when they were supposed to be in an alliance, and then did try to only take partial credit for blocking Bryant when she was solely responsible, from our understanding.
So are people, I haven't seen the social media chat about it, are people like not in agreement that Savannah blew up her own game? Like...
I think that it's kind of split 50-50 from what I've seen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I just feel like it's so blatant that she blew her own game up for no reason. And, like, it wasn't like it was one thing like we've been through. It was a lot of things. It was a lot of, explosions. It wasn't one big thing. But she's to blame for her own, blockage in this.
Yeah, no, she lit the match, lit the fuse, went, bought some gasoline, came back, poured gasoline on it, lit the fuse some more, and then added some more explosives to the thing, and then stood back and looked at the result.
I would even be surprised if she, if you asked her, she would be like, yeah, I messed up a lot. That's why I lost the circle.
Yeah.
I doubt she would even be like, no, this was all, Terilisha's fault, I mean, maybe she has no self-awareness. I don't know. Reality TV people are sometimes like that, where it's like, I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
And it's like when we're watching, like, yeah, you did a lot of things wrong. What are you talking about? But I think by the way she was talking at the end to Courtney, she understands what she did wrong and why she was kicked out of the game. So I'm just surprised people on social media are like defending her gameplay. Like, you can like her as a person, sure, she was super entertaining in her short time, but she was a bad circle player.
Sure, I think that it's less people defending her and more of like who was more in the wrong between Savannah and Terilisha, or who was more in the right. Like, because they were both clearly in the wrong in how they handled the situation, and they both, this 4-episode block of episodes, like the first 2 episodes is the rise of Terilisha and Savannah, and the second 2 episodes is the fall. So like they definitely both made a lot of mistakes. It's just a matter of who was more in the right in terms of the conflict. And in my opinion, Terilisha is more in the right, and did the fewest amount of things to manufacture this conflict. I think the one thing, like I mentioned before, was like it's unnecessary for Terilisha to try to defend her honor and say that she didn't want Bryant to go. that's not a good look from a game perspective to air that out. But on top of that, it is true. So like she's not like
Lying about it, yeah.
lying about it, right? So
Mm.
while it's strategically not great, it's like you couldn't say she's necessarily in the wrong for saying that.
Yeah, and I think we can both agree, like, as a player, it doesn't matter if you're in the right or wrong. All that matters is, like, maintaining the relationships and your footing in the
Yep.
game. So if you can go on a show like this and just avoid those, like, because in real life, you're like, I don't want to be painted as anything else. Like, if you can just avoid the ego of, like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, oh, I don't want to be painted this way, and like more focus on like how do I remain socially good with people. I think that's way more important than like, yeah, Terilisha, she won this battle, but I don't.
At what cost?
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna work out for her long term,
Yeah.
and I think she could have avoided it, even with Savannah being the instigator of a lot of the situation. She even probably could have recovered with Savannah if she like talked it out with her, and
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't look good
Mm-hmm.
for
Yeah.
anyone involved.
Yeah. I do think a lot of people view the instigating moment being Terilisha calling out Savannah in the Truth or Dare game, when in
Oh yeah,
reality there was so many instigating moments that like smaller instigating moments that Savannah had done leading up to that, the saving Trevor, the expressing doubt about Chloe in the influencer chat, the way that she handled the circle chat after Bryant was blocked, like all of these things, the conversation even with Chloe and Emily, like so many of these things that Savannah did wrong that put her in the position where Terilisha felt like she needed to call out Savannah in order to
mm,
defend her own position.
yeah, and we just said that she probably should have done that as a player, but we
Mm-hmm.
understand why she did it. So
Right.
uh, I think we're in agreement. This is more on Savannah than on Terilisha, and I am surprised that people aren't seeing that because I thought the show did a good job of like explaining where Savannah went wrong. Personally,
Yeah, I agree. And we end up seeing what I think is the correct outcome at the end of episode 4,
mm.
where Savannah does end up being the one to get blocked.
Yeah, and that's a good point for it too because like you can have like your feelings on it, whatever, but you also have to gauge what the feelings of the other players were to kind of find the truth of the whole situation. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I personally think the show did a good job of explaining why Savannah was the one to go home over Terilisha, right? And I
Yeah.
wasn't surprised like when it came
No.
out that she like we knew it was going to come down to the two of them, but I think we had a good inclination that Emily and Chloe were on Terilisha's side.
Yes, I agree. I was not surprised. During the influence chat later with Chloe and Emily, we'll get to. I
Mm,
was just expecting at that point for Savannah to end up getting blocked, and I was just
yeah.
kind of like going through the motions.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we finished this Truth or Dare game. All the shit is on the table. Everybody has kind of seen this blow up, and now
Mm,
people in their own apartments are starting to pick their sides, and the sides are kind of to be expected, where we have Trevor and Courtney are backing Savannah because they've had more of a one-on-one relationship with her. River is backing Terilisha because he's had more of a one-on-one relationship with her. And now it comes down to Terilisha versus Savannah. Who can win the girl gang's trust and who
mm.
can like get them to take their side, basically?
Yeah. And I thought they both. I thought it was avoidable that they had to split the house between the two of them. I don't think this is good for either of their games. That being
Mm-hmm.
said, I did appreciate both of their efforts to try to end up on top. But I don't think either of them were bad at that aspect of it. I just think Terilisha was a little better, and that's ultimately and I think the other players could see the truth more so than Savannah was trying to portray it. Like it definitely was like once they got all the information, it was like Terilisha probably is not lying, and we're gonna
Yeah.
keep her. you know.
Yeah, her story checked out a little bit more cleanly, I would say.
And by not picking Chloe, that was already like a really bad like start
Yep.
to it.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's going to be a harder sell for Savannah, just even from like her public actions, to like sell herself as being right in this situation. Like Terilisha is even coming into it just from a more powerful position, anyway. It's just because she did follow through and save Emily.
yeah, exactly. Like that's a great point. I mean, she has in the moments where she could prove trust to the people she made alliances with, she did it, and Savannah didn't.
Yeah. So. Yep. So yeah, we get our first important conversation here. We talked already about the Saquon Barkley conversation. We don't have to re-go over that.
I do want to say it looks super fun to be hanging out in that hot tub and talking to people. Like,
yeah,
that just seems really neat. Anyways.
Yeah, and they have like the wicker chair thing in the yoga room. That seems really cool. Like I love like swingy chairs, like just like the feeling. Like
yeah.
So they have a lot of cool places to hang out and just chat. The gym seems really nice. So yeah.
Yeah. Are all those areas are shared areas, right? So you get like a time period to go into them.
Okay. Yes, you have to start. So they each have to like basically sign up and register for time slots for those areas.
Yeah, no, I think that's like really cool because I've watched like some videos of people who were like on other versions of the circle, and I presume it's the same filming location for all of them. At least it looks like it.
Yes.
I guess the apartments are like super bright because they're filming obviously in them. They need good lighting, which is probably really off-putting to be like, you know, like right now I have really bright lights for, I'm sure you can tell, like for this, but to live like this would be weird. And then you can't open the windows to get any fresh air. So like just having a change of scenery would probably be really good mentally.
Yeah.
For all the players.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I think that before last year, I think a lot of people probably didn't have the context of what it would be like to be locked into an apartment or a home and not be able to leave much for a protracted amount of time. But definitely, just the ability to get different types of stimulation in terms of like mental health is probably very good, and especially for like a very stressful game like the Circle.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, everyone who's going to go on now has been training, and they're just going to add the stress of the game on top of everything.
Yep.
Yeah, but they'll probably be able to handle it better, so.
Yeah, it's surprising that really hasn't come up more in terms of, like, you know, living on my own in this apartment, being locked in here is not that big of a deal for me now. You know, not a lot of, like, wink, because I don't know if they just don't want to date the series, but.
That definitely could be. I wonder. Well, it'll be interesting to see in the future seasons that film like after COVID really like went on for a long time. If people mention that kind of a thing, but it could be like you said, they just don't want to either date the series or this is like escapism.
Yeah.
For people, and it's like we don't want to remind people like about the real world when they're just trying to chill and watch a Netflix like a silly Netflix reality TV show.
Yeah.
You know? But anyways, let's get back to it. Back on.
Yeah. So at this point, everybody like the kind of feel in the game is just kind of like who is going to win this war, right? It's like everyone is kind of like, okay, I'm Team Terilisha or I'm Team Savannah, and it's very much feeling like it's building up to one of them being the next one to be blocked. So we get Terilisha jumping in with this girl chat to give her side of the story to Chloe and Emily. And what do you think about this? I think it's went relatively well for Terilisha.
I think it went well for her. I think it kind of set up a little bit later on in this, like, Emily, Jack, Emily, they need to commit. Like, they need to, like, show more of a backbone and like be, you know, because he was trying to be like, oh, I you know, I get what you're saying, but not like Chloe, who was like, yes, like fuck Savannah, I agree with you, you know, which is like, I don't know if that's necessarily the right move to be as forward, but like I do feel like it's setting the groundwork for like Jack is gonna get taken out because he is not committing to people enough. Could be wrong, of course, but like that's at least like the long term storyline and really the main storyline for him as a competitor.
Yeah, and we see this as well. Even Emily's fencing doesn't even pay off, right? Because the idea is, oh, I'm going to be like non-committal, and then I'll just come out on the side that wins. But Emily ends up having to be involved in the decision,
Right?
and then on top of that, after Savannah is blocked, she pretty much solely puts the entirety of the blame onto Emily and calls Emily a snake and that like she like backstabbed her and stuff like that. So yeah, for Emily, it's just you get the worst of both worlds, where for the person that you're trying to build trust with in Terilisha, and then also secondarily Chloe by being on the same page as her, you're not getting that level of like allyship with them because you're not giving enough like emotion and enough like feelings of committal to that group and that cause that somebody like Chloe was giving, where Chloe goes on this rant of like, yeah, Savannah's the worst, I can't believe she did that, etc., etc., and Emily's like, yes, I agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah, no, it's bad. It's not immediately game ending bad, but like
No.
there are certain points in these reality games where you have to show your cards a bit. Not
Yes.
all your cards, but you have to seem like you're someone that people can go to and
Right.
have a good feeling about and trust. And not doing it right now, but Jack is a big fan of these games, so I'm not going to say that he won't do it. Maybe he's just like, this is too early for me to do it, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll definitely see. I think that I think she has to pick a side soon. I think that obviously by blocking Savannah, she has picked a side with Terilisha. Now she has to actually, get into a chat with Terilisha and reaffirm that trust and that alliance a little bit stronger. And she also has to do a better job of reaching out to some of these other players, like some of these guys. Maybe like Lance Bass could be a good person for Emily to reach out to. She did try to reach out to Trevor and form some kind of bond there over their like shared family values. Obviously, it didn't go perfectly because Trevor now does have some suspicions. But
Yeah.
I'm interested to see where Emily goes from here. I'm interested to see if Jack really changes up the way that he's playing the character after this kind of has resolved itself. But yeah, definitely when like your number one ally supposedly in Chloe, like literally every time they're in a conversation together, all we see is Chloe being so like frustrated and frazzled over the fact that Emily like is so non-committal to everything and is so like reserved and giving her opinion on literally anything that has transpired in the circle or her opinion on anybody. And she does open up a little more in the influencer chat. But even with that, Chloe is still like, this girl's still not giving me enough.
Yeah.
So.
No, and it's just like the character that we've been talking for 2 hours. I'm sure I've said this already, but like the character that Emily is very opposed to the person Chloe is.
Yeah.
So it's hard, obviously. That's like I said, that's why I couldn't do it. I could not play a catfish. I would fuck it up.
Yeah, no, obviously it's hard to play a catfish. Like, we're not saying, like, oh, it's so stupid, it's so easy, right? But, like,
yeah, I'm saying the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't do it, so, but I'm still trying to analyze it, like, Monday morning quarterback it.
Sure, of course. I do think it does eventually come back to the fact, one, that I think that in a lot of ways Jack is outthinking himself in terms of, like, how he's playing the strategy of the game. And I think that somebody like Chloe is doing a much better job just like naturally being like a social, likable person. And she's coming off as more authentic in that way. And on top of that too, again, as I mentioned earlier, I think that there is this inclination that we see with men who play women catfishes to play them in a certain way that is more fence city, is more timid, is more like non-committal. And I think that's just strictly incorrect. Even though it has been successful in the past with, like, it has technically been successful in the past with Alex, aka Kate, even though a big storyline with Kate was that she was Fence City, she was non-committal, she was untrustworthy and kind of snaky for that reason, and she kind of ended up winning by default. So, like, it's tricky to, like, analyze that sort of gameplay because it can be successful, but it can kind of be successful despite itself. So,
yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So now we end up with now that Terilisha has told her side of the story, Savannah has to come in and tell her side of the story a little bit late. You generally definitely want to be, I think, the first person to be the one telling your side, because that's going to be like the default story. And then now Savannah is going to have to try to sell a new story that's better, right?
Right.
So, like, she has to beat the baseline that Terilisha has set. And she does not, unfortunately for her.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was a hard sell, too, because she already put, like, distance between herself and Chloe by not picking her. So that was already going to be against her, but she didn't do herself any favors necessarily.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. And we see throughout this entire conversation that while Emily and Chloe are kind of, like, you know, feeding bullshit back to Savannah, Emily more so than Chloe, especially Chloe in her own head in her apartment, is talking about how, like, Savannah's full of shit. She doesn't believe anything she's saying. Why is Emily being so naive? Is she really, like, buying into this crap? Like, all this stuff. So it becomes very obvious to us at the very least which side Chloe at least is on in this war. But it is funny to me that Chloe gets so worked up about, like, Emily, like, playing in the middle and, like, being like fake to Savannah, and then she goes and just does the exact same thing, just, like, to a slightly less extreme level back to Savannah, where she's also being fake to Savannah and, like, not being open about her true feelings. I think that's very funny, and, like, there is kind of, like, a level of lack of self-awareness there from Chloe, I think.
Yeah. Because I don't know if it's, like, because Emily kind of set the tone, Chloe was like, I guess I have to do that also, or if, like you said, maybe it's just, like, she would have done that anyways. I wonder.
Yeah. I have to assume that she probably would have done it anyways, just because she did take a very measured approach in her earlier conversation with Savannah, where Emily wasn't talking too much, where in that conversation she was also being very fake to Savannah and saying, oh yeah, Girl Gang is still definitely on, like, no doubt.
Right.
Like, there's no fractures here at all. We've totally worked this out. So, I do think that it is kind of like Chloe is being, like, a certain level of fake, but because Emily, like, takes it to an even like another level, and on top of that, Emily is not, like, even being super open with Chloe about her true feelings. Like, that's what's frustrating to Chloe, because they're supposed to be, like, you know, BFFs or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that after the influencer chat with the two of them, they come out of it more like stronger, united pair, and there's less of that. But we'll see.
Yeah, we will.
All right. Anything else we want to talk about before we get to the final ratings and influencer chat here?
I'm trying to think if there's anything too big. I don't feel like there was. I feel like we covered these 4 episodes pretty top to bottom.
Yep.
Unless there's just some big obvious thing I'm forgetting.
No, I think there was the other thing with we were showed a very brief clip before the ratings and influencer chat of Chloe, Courtney, and River having a conversation where Chloe was, like, teaching them, like, UK slang and, like, her own, like, dialect or, like, whatever, and, like, teaching them, like fun phrases that she uses and stuff like that. I think this is kind of, like, setting foundation for potentially going into the future, because she does bring this threesome up in the influencer chat with Emily, and she calls them, like, the 3 amigos, and that really, like, sets off some alarm bells for Emily, like, oh shit, Chloe's made a lot more connections than I have, huh?
Yeah. No, I don't know if I would have told Emily about that if I were Chloe. To be honest, I would have been like, I'm doing a good job laying groundwork. I don't necessarily need to share this with anybody.
Yeah.
You know,
No, for sure.
especially where like let's be honest, man. When they get into that influencer chat, they probably have to do it for the show where they go through everyone.
Oh yeah.
But like, if I was in there, I would be like, let's just cut to the chase. It's gonna be one of these two, you know. But I'm like I said, I'm sure the show like tells them you have to talk about everybody. But...
Yes. Yeah, I definitely agree that the show definitely tells them, yes, you should go through each person and give your thoughts on each person so that we can have that content to explain to the audience why.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so that's pretty much it before we get to the ratings here. We have our first ratings. Lance is able to rate, but is not involved in being rated, and he is safe from this blocking as a new player. And we get our ratings results back, and man, what a surprise here. Definitely shocked. Can't even understand how this could have happened. Terilisha is our number 7 player on the rankings.
Yep.
Wow. I was stunned, Brian. I was stunned.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite part is Savannah celebrating it and then it immediately being her next at 6. That was so good. The editing just...
Yeah, they do a very good job of that. Yeah, and then I think, was it River and then Courtney, or was it Courtney and then River?
That's a good question.
5 and 4 were. I think River was 5 and Courtney was 4.
That sounds right to me.
Yeah.
I should write these rankings down. I'll write them down for the next episode.
I thought that I had them memorized, but that was one that I didn't necessarily remember. I'm pretty sure it was River 5th because I think he made a comment like, oh, maybe I'm in the top 4 now, you know, and I've risen up in the rankings, and then he was 5th, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Sadly. Just
yeah.
All right. Well.
Yeah. And then we get number 3 for the second round in a row. Kind of like a little bit of a dark horse here. It wasn't really getting a ton of credit for this, and also really a ton of people seeing him as a threat. But we have Trevor twice in a row now coming in 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, if you can like be in this spot where you're safe and no one picks up on like you potentially being a threat because you're not the one making the decisions, and then all the drama like goes away from you, that is good. That's really good.
Very solid spot to be in. And he also, we are shown, is the person that Lance rates first, with a very little information that he has at this time, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because they do have like kind of a bros chat about where Lance is trying to weed out some info about what the fuck is going on because he has no context on this drama.
I mean, that is a tough spot to come into.
Yeah.
Where like something has happened, I don't understand what, so like I gotta piece it together, and just went to the wrong person for information. Yeah,
Terilisha is intentionally playing into like, oh, guys just stay out of drama. They don't like drama. This is like drama is girl shit. You know, this is like a cat fight between 2 girls. I, as Trevor, the dude, the guy, am not going to get involved in this. Which, yeah, again, an instance of somebody really like playing too hard into the catfish archetype they're playing, in my opinion. But it's not too bad.
Right.
And then we get our 2 influencers. We talk about how everyone picked their sides, and in the middle, the ones who are really going to be making the decision of which side to pick are going to end up being the other members of Girl Gang, Chloe and Emily. And we have our number 1, number 2 being Chloe and Emily.
Of course.
So it makes sense. Not surprising, given that basically everyone else is aware of where they stand, and so everyone's going to rate accordingly. And the people who are going to be rated more average towards the top are the people who everyone kind of sees as somebody that they could get. And so obviously that's going to be the ones who are playing the middle the hardest. That's Chloe and Emily. And now they're put in a position where they have to pick a side.
Oh man. And so I guess we can talk. I feel like we've talked about all this, but we talked a little bit about when they were doing the influencer chat, there was a conversation between Savannah and Terilisha, and it did not go well at all. Um, almost completely unnecessary to have because it was very obvious that it was going to be one of them going home, and then like having it didn't help the situation at all. So that was fun. But yeah, I mean, like I said, we all knew as the audience it was going to come down to those two, and we all probably knew that it was going to be Savannah. I mean, there was certainly a chance that it was like a complete blindside because sometimes reality TV shows don't give you all the information and then something happens just to shock you. But I think the Circle did a good job of explaining why this happened.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that the coming in, like after Emily and Chloe are influencers, I'm like, yeah, I think that's probably just going to be Savannah at this point.
Yeah.
And then even like throughout their influencer chat, it just became more and more clear to me that like, yeah, Savannah's done. Yeah, we have to have them go through each of the other 5 players, and it seems like Emily is trying to put out feelers for them, or for Chloe to potentially be down with one of Terilisha and Savannah not going. Maybe Emily's idea is like, oh, we keep them both in, we don't pick a side outwardly, and then they continue to go at each other and take some heat off of us. But based off of the relationships that Chloe has formed, she pretty quickly like shuts down like all 3 of the other ones because she's like flirting with Trevor, and then she's like, oh, I have this 3 amigos thing, I guess, with River and Courtney, and Emily's like, oh, okay, I didn't know Chloe had all these connections. I have none of those connections. And then throughout it, Emily is giving like very surface level takes and opinions on the other players, and Chloe is just getting more and more frustrated that she won't give any kind of meaningful opinion, which is fun. But yeah, it comes down to Terilisha and Savannah. We don't really see too much of this conversation because they want to maintain the aura of the surprise. But I presume they just kind of go through like the stories, and they're like, yeah, Terilisha's story makes more sense. Savannah seems like she is trying to snake the girl gang. We don't really trust her. Hopefully, Emily gave enough to sate Chloe so that Chloe can stop like distrusting Emily just on the basis of her not giving her enough. And then we have Emily, I think, good on Emily to be like, I want to be the one to break it, because this is like kind of her actually stepping up and taking responsibility for something for the first time, which for Chloe I think is good. And like obviously there's not a ton that being the one to break the news is going to do in theory, so it's not a terrible thing to be.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think Emily had to do that.
Yeah.
Considering how everything else, I think that definitely, for Chloe, was like, okay, like, I appreciate that Emily volunteered to do this because it's an awkward situation.
Yeah.
And it kind of, like, shows that she's willing to take heat for Chloe.
Yeah.
So, I think it was good that Jack, as Emily, decided to do that.
Yeah. And then Savannah finds out that she has been blocked.
Mm-hmm.
That's too bad. You know, we couldn't milk this drama for more than 2 episodes, but it was 2 very glorious episodes.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think talking last night, this was like more intense than any bit of season 1 was. Like,
oh, for sure,
so
yeah.
This makes me feel confident that these people have come to play, and they're, you know, messy, but in a good way, in an entertaining way.
Yeah. 100%. You know, sad to see Savannah go, but happy she was here for the time that she was, to bring the drama, bring the fireworks, and have one of the swiftest downfalls that I've ever seen somebody have in reality TV. In terms of going from the top to the bottom in the course of like 2 days flat.
Yeah, pretty fun. Really great episodes. Can't wait till the next ones. I think with how long our our episode on this. This should give you plenty of stuff to listen to until next Wednesday when the new episodes drop.
Yeah, we got our new episodes. We have. I assume we're going to open up with this this cliffhanger that we ended on with Courtney being chosen as Savannah as the person she wants to see win. She goes to visit him, and she tells him the real snake is actually Emily, which was surprising to me. Given, I guess because she like my assumption is that like she feels like Chloe is more vindicated in being upset at Savannah because Savannah didn't save Chloe, and like Emily doesn't really have a reason to be upset, and so I guess she sees that as more like snaky.
Right.
But yeah, we see her give this information to Courtney, and we end the episode with Courtney being brought to the inner circle, and where it's to be determined what this is going to mean.
Yeah, I have no predictions because I don't know the circle enough to kind of go with what kind of twists they would run. But I'm excited. I'm looking forward to finding out what it is.
Yeah, I've seen speculation that maybe he'll be able to enter into circle chats in some sort of anonymous mode, or he'll be able to like see private chats between people as a lurker. Like that seems like to be the variance of how I have seen people speculating on this twist. I think that's probably a fine way to do this, where he just kind of gains information or is able to like stir the pot anonymously. So that's probably my guess, and I would be fine with that. I think that's an okay twist in terms of balance. As long as he's not being given like unilateral decisions over the next influencers or the next blocking in some way. I think that information as an advantage is a fine way to play this sort of a twist.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we'll see. Like I said, I don't want to speculate because I have no clue.
Yeah.
Like literally, could be anything to me as someone who's only watched the first season of The Circle and these 4 episodes.
Yeah.
And the first season wasn't too twist heavy, if I recall. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. This is a lot of fun. I think we really covered it. Like we dug deep into it.
Top to bottom.
That if people check this out, that they like it, and hey, maybe subscribe to us on the various podcast channels and the YouTube channel, of course, Better Radio. Ben, where can they find you online?
Yeah, you can find me mostly on Twitter at Ben Sharon. I haven't tweeted really much about The Circle yet. Just it's a very hard, especially the US version of The Circle. It's a very hard show to tweet about because it's hard to tweet. Like I wanted to give my thoughts on like the whole like Savannah and Terilisha situation, but if I'm doing that on Thursday, right? A lot of people may not have seen all 4 episodes yet. I don't want to be spoiling people on Twitter, and it's very hard to talk about the show without spoiling it. So I haven't talked a lot about The Circle, but you can follow me there. I've been giving my opinion on BBCan 9 as well, which is going to be wrapping up soon, hopefully.
Yes, and you've been heading up the coverage of BBK 9 in the Have Not Room, another podcast much like this, which I'm on sometimes.
Yeah.
I haven't been on recently, but I'll be back on soon.
Yeah.
Probably for the next episode. And then we have our great co-host, Chad, who, very into Big Brother and gives a lot of great insight as well. So you can check that out on this channel, Better Radio, or on podcast services. Just, search Have Not Room. And, you can follow me on Twitter at @theFakeBMar. That's BMARR. And we are on Twitter as a channel at WG Everything, on Instagram at WickedGoodEverything, on Twitch at twitch.tv/WickedGoodEverything, where every Thursday Ben hosts an Among Us playthrough with a bunch of our friends. It's a lot of fun. Don't want to miss that. And the main channel is, of course, youtube.com/WickedGoodEverything, where we have just a smorgasbord of content, sketches, news videos. It's all happening, Ben.
Yeah, Wicked Good Sports.
Wicked Good Sports. Oh, how could I forget? Wicked Good Sports, where it's about sports.
Yeah, you can talk about Saquon Barkley there, and people will know what you're talking about.
Exactly. So if you want to hear a little bit about currently the NFL, NHL, and NBA go there. And we're hoping, I know Jenny wants to talk about the U.S. women's soccer team since they have, I believe, the Olympics. I don't think it's the World Cup. I think it's the Olympics coming up. So they're in training for that. So we'll be talking about them. And yeah, I think that's it, Ben. I know I just talked for 5 minutes of plugging all our stuff.
Yeah.
I think I covered it mostly.
2.5-hour podcast, and you end it with 10 minutes of plugs.
Yes, I mean, yeah, you got to do it to them.
Yeah. If you've gotten this far, then,
Right, yeah. I just assume no one's listening at this point.
Yeah.
It's just been so long. But if you are, we thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in the next Influencer Chat.